Good day and welcome to FDM, the channel dedicated to Ferra data models. Well, it's Friday and time for an update to our Are We Winning series. Now I've already updated the data, and what I want to do now is, or today, is to also use the fatalities or the deaths as a projection. Now it's a very simple argument. If somebody dies today from COVID-19 and the fatality rate is 1%, meaning 1 in 100 people will die because of the sickness, then it means, as a rough back of the envelope type calculation, 2 weeks ago 100 people were infected. So 1 fatality today means 100 infections 2 weeks ago. So what I did was to add that. So I'm calculating here, I'm calculating the relative deaths for the world, relative to the population side of the world, the total deaths reported, and I multiply it by 100 just to make it easy. Then I multiply it by another 100. I smooth it and I calculate the change in that smooth value. And then I lead that by 14 days. I move it back 2 weeks, basically. And this gives me a projection of the infection rate. So if I do all of this, then I get a projection of the infection rate that I can compare to the official reported infection rate. So let's look at the new infections first of all. And this is the model, sort of a baseline case. This, you can ignore these numbers. They are all scaled relative to some fixed point where I set it all equal. Actually, on this point, when I started running this from here onwards, everything was calibrated to reality on this date. And here you can see the US, for example. The US is doing well at the moment, although they seem to be ticking up a bit again, this magenta line, as they are opening up. Here you see the world. The world is struggling. Although it's stable, we need the world figures to come down. We need all of these figures to come down to win. But at the moment, the world is struggling. The world's not really going anywhere, maybe up even. Here's South Africa, and South Africa is really struggling. South Africa doesn't have it under control. And it's really not doing well at the moment. Okay, let's look at the other reports. Yeah, I look at the figures relative to population sizes. So if you look at the figures relative to population sizes, this is what you get. There's South Africa, and there you can see the struggle. Although we're below this benchmark that the model provides. We've just punctured it. We just moved above that. So we're sort of in line with the model, but we really should be below the model and going to zero to win the battle. The US, of course, hit very hard by the virus, but they seem to be going in the right direction, at least, except for the last couple of days where you can see this 7-day moving average turning up again as they are opening up. A bit of an increase again in infections. Okay, I also want to look at the relative figures for South Africa only. All right, so in this case, the highlighted area is the level 5 lockdown. That's the initial lockdown. And you can see the lockdown, although the lockdown was really necessary. I think the lockdown was really necessary, but it didn't work. We didn't work as it should have. During the lockdown, this went down, but this should really have gone to zero. We should have killed the thing here, but we couldn't. And I think what you see here is the infection being carried around by the army, by the police force, and so on. Also by people circumventing the lockdown regulations. So even though these figures could be arguing or or somebody could start arguing for another lockdown to get this under control. When the lockdown does not work, as I've shown in another simulation, when the lockdown does not work, you only disperse the virus. And to get these extremely rapid increases, that means that you've got a virus breakout in more than one geographic location. This is not just one outbreak. This is the sum of a few outbreaks working together to push these numbers up in this rapid fashion. So another lockdown, I don't think we'll even push it down to these levels. Again, the virus will be carried around by normal citizens who've now learned how to circumvent the lockdown regulations, by normal moving around of the army and the police, by normal moving around of emergency personnel. So I don't think we'll ever manage to really make the lockdown work. So I don't think we should have another lockdown. And I think that as a result of this failed lockdown, we now have this phenomenal outbreak that you see here. Now let's look at deaths. I've already created the report, and here you see the deaths or fatalities relative to population sizes. So there's the world, the total number of deaths divided by the world population, which provides sort of a benchmark in this case. There's the world. There you can see the US. US extremely hard hit by this, huge fatality rate there for some reason, and there you see South Africa. So although the figures doesn't look good, at least our fatality rate is much better than that of the world. Let's hope it stays better, but yeah, time will tell. Okay, let's look at the at this one. Now what I'm doing here is I'm using the number of deaths to give an estimate of the number of infections, as I've explained at the beginning. So one death now means there was 100 newly infected 2 weeks ago. And if I do that, then looking at the US, there's the reported US infections, right? That magenta line, that's the reported US infections, or the new infections calculated from the reported figures. If I use the US deaths to project that figure, I get a vastly larger number, a number that's a lot higher. So the actual infections in the US is probably somewhere between this line and that yellow line up there. So the US probably has got a much higher infection rate than reported based on the number of deaths recorded there. And for South Africa, this is what it looks like. Now, this is swamped by the huge numbers here. So let's zoom in on South Africa itself. So here's South Africa. So what you see here are the reported number of new infections and then the forecasted or the projected number of new infections based on the deaths. And I think the actual figure is somewhere in between these two lines. I think this is not capturing all of the cases, and that is probably overstating the cases, but the actual figure is probably somewhere in between these two. Worrying thing is that I've used a model, this deadline, as a type of a benchmark. We've just punctured that. We've been below that, well below it at the outset, but recently we've been running away, and now we've even punctured that. So we probably need some action to keep this under control. But as I've said, another lockdown probably won't work. That will only disperse the spread, and when the lockdown is lifted, will cause another even more rapid rise. Well, that's it. Thank you. See you next time.